There are certain neighborhoods where tranquility exists only on the surface, where every manicured lawn hides a quiet tension, and every trimmed hedge conceals a resident convinced that they alone uphold civilization. My neighborhood was exactly that kind of place. The kind where an HOA president could measure the height of your grass with the same seriousness others reserved for international diplomacy. And among all the enforcers of suburban perfection, none reigned more fiercely, more relentlessly, more theatrically than Karen Aldridge. Karen didn't technically hold any HOA position. She wasn't the president. She wasn't the secretary. She wasn't even on a committee. But she had something far more potent, the unwavering belief that she should be in charge. And in many ways, she acted as if she already was. She patrolled the cul-de-sac with the authority of a traffic marshal, peering from behind her decorative window shutters like a hawk scanning for the slightest breach of order. For months, I had managed to stay off her radar. I mowed my lawn on time, kept my trash cans pulled in before sunset, and maintained a vehicle that even she couldn't criticize. My car, a clean, dark gray sedan, was parked neatly in my own driveway every day, exactly where it belonged. It was my small sanctuary from work stress and neighborhood politics. And yet, this was precisely the car she chose to target. It started with an orange notice. Not an HOA citation, this was different. It was a bright sticker slapped onto my driver's side window, the kind usually reserved for abandoned vehicles or street-parked junkers left for dead. The top read in all caps, "Notice, vehicle reported for removal." At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Someone must have confused my house with another. But the fine print dissolved that hope quickly. It stated that the vehicle had been reported to the county towing department and was pending removal if the owner failed to relocate it. Relocate it from my own driveway. The absurdity would have been funny if it weren't so intrusive. I peeled the sticker off carefully, making sure not to damage the glass, and searched for more information. At the bottom corner in small typed letters was the name of the reporting resident. Complaint filed by K. Aldridge. I didn't need a guidebook to interpret that initial. Only one person in the neighborhood wielded her first initial like a badge of authority. Karen had reported my fully registered, fully operational vehicle as abandoned. In my own driveway. I tried to piece together what justification she believed she had. The car wasn't dirty. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't leaking fluids or obstructing anything. It was simply a car doing what cars do when parked. Karen's behavior had always been a topic of hushed porch conversations and group chats shared among neighbors with the subtlety of coded messages. Stories of her reporting teenagers for skateboarding, filing noise complaints against wind chimes, and once attempting to start an initiative to ban front-yard inflatable decorations were well known. But this was another level of audacity. At first, I thought it would resolve itself with a phone call. I dialed the county's non-emergency towing inquiry line and explained the situation. The man on the phone paused for a moment, processing the details, then politely but firmly informed me that the complaint was logged, and the vehicle was scheduled for removal within 48 hours unless the owner contacted the towing contractor directly. I felt a cold irritation crawl through me. The county wouldn't stop the order. Only the contracted company could verify ownership and cancel it. And the worst part, I knew exactly how Karen was telling the story. In her version, she was protecting the neighborhood from blight, from eyesores, from the creeping chaos she imagined would swallow us all if she didn't intervene. She likely convinced herself she had saved everyone from a potential hazard. Or worse, she knew she was in the wrong but enjoyed exerting power anyway. By sunset, I had made 2 phone calls and left 1 voicemail with the towing company. I had also taken photos of my car from every angle, time-stamped, and made sure my documents were on hand. It was tedious work, but necessary. Experience had taught me that suburban disputes often escalated not because of the issues themselves, but because someone underestimated the persistence of the person on the receiving end. The next morning, matters escalated further. A small notice was slipped into my mailbox unsigned, but unmistakably written in Karen's neat, looping handwriting. She informed me, as though doing me a favor, that improperly stored vehicles create negative aesthetic impacts, and that she had acted in accordance with community standards. Community standards, not legal standards, not HOA rules, just her interpretation of what suburban life should look like. And then the threat. Your vehicle must be removed if not in active use. Noncompliance may result in additional reports. The phrasing was intentionally vague, crafted to sound official while containing no actual authority. But there was one thing she didn't anticipate. I wasn't the kind of neighbor who would silently accept false accusations. If she wanted a conflict, she was about to learn what it meant to pick a fight with someone who did their homework. By noon, I had already started pulling the county property records, reviewing vehicle ordinances, and reading up on the towing contractor's limitations. And as I dove deeper, the story shifted from irritating to shocking, because what I uncovered wasn't just proof that my car was legally parked. It was evidence that Karen's complaint was so inaccurate, so baseless, that it violated civil reporting guidelines. Which meant that for the first time, I held the leverage. And I intended to use it. The battle line had been drawn. Karen had tried to tow my perfectly legal car off my own driveway, but the game was about to change. And the next move was mine. There are certain moments in suburban conflict when irritation transforms into resolve, when the absurdity of a situation becomes so undeniable that the only logical response is to push back with precision. As I sat at my desk, poring over county regulations and property records, that shift happened for me. The more information I uncovered, the clearer it became that Karen had not simply made a mistake. She had orchestrated a deliberate attempt to weaponize bureaucracy for her personal crusade. The county website became my battleground. It listed, in meticulous detail, the ordinances regarding vehicle storage, property boundaries, and resident rights. Each regulation I checked against my situation left Karen's complaint standing on shakier ground. A legally registered, operable vehicle parked on privately owned property had full protection. No HOA rule, unless explicitly written into the association bylaws, could override county authority. And more importantly, an individual resident had no legal standing to request towing from private property without proof of hazard or abandonment. Two criteria my car didn't even remotely meet. The towing request she filed was not just invalid, it bordered on false reporting. That realization fueled me. It was no longer about defending my driveway or my car. It was about drawing a boundary that Karen had crossed far too many times with others. Stories of her antics echoed in the back of my mind. How she had intimidated a new family over their choice of mailbox design. How she reported a retired couple for grass discoloration during a heat wave. How she insisted a disabled veteran remove a small ramp because it clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. Each incident had been dismissed by the affected neighbors in exchange for peace, but peace had only emboldened her. And now her focus was on me. I downloaded every relevant regulation and saved copies of the towing complaint procedure. The inconsistencies were glaring. Karen had claimed the vehicle was abandoned, yet county criteria for abandonment required the car to be left unattended on public property for an extended period. I had records, bank statements, dash cam time logs, even a timestamped photo from the previous week, showing I used the car regularly. The deeper I investigated, the more confident I became that her complaint wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. And that meant I had leverage over the towing company too. If they had accepted a faulty report without verifying basic details, they were equally responsible for any consequences. A towing contractor acting on a false claim risked both their contract and legal repercussions. Armed with information, I opened the voicemail inbox and found a new message from the towing company. The voice was polite but firm. They needed proof of ownership and a statement confirming the vehicle's active use. They requested a callback to avoid proceeding with removal. I drafted a concise email instead, attaching photos, registration documents, and a scanned copy of my deed showing property boundaries. I referenced county regulations, explicitly citing the sections that prohibited towing from private property without consent. Then I requested a formal confirmation of cancellation. The tone of my email was professional, but its message was clear. I knew my rights and I wasn't bluffing. After sending it, I stepped outside to examine the driveway more closely. I wanted to ensure there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that Karen could twist into justification. The car sat clean and orderly. The driveway was clear. No oil stains, no debris, no obstructions. It looked exactly as any suburban driveway should. As I stood there, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. A curtain across the street shifted. Karen's silhouette appeared, watching from behind her floral-patterned drapes. She scanned my driveway with exaggerated scrutiny, her posture stiff with disapproval. It was the same posture she used when inspecting lawns, mailboxes, porch decor, anything she believed fell under her imaginary jurisdiction. She held a clipboard, of course she did. There was something almost theatrical about how she observed the neighborhood, as though every detail was part of a performance designed to reinforce her authority. And in her mind, I had disrupted the script. I was the resident who refused to play my assigned role. She remained at the window for several seconds, then vanished behind her curtains. It was a small gesture, but it told me everything. She knew she had been seen. She knew her report had been challenged, and she didn't like it. Inside, my phone buzzed. The towing company had responded. They acknowledged receipt of my documents and stated that the removal order was temporarily paused pending verification. That wording struck me. Temporarily paused, not canceled, not withdrawn, paused. Meaning Karen could still interfere. The thought made me double down. I began compiling a packet, a collection of evidence that included property maps, ordinance excerpts, and a timeline of events. Not because I expected to go to court, but because suburban conflicts often hinge on preparedness. The more thorough the documentation, the more powerful the position. By evening, the packet was complete. I stored both digital and printed copies. As I prepared dinner, an uneasy curiosity pressed at me. Why did Karen choose my car? Why now? Had someone complained to her about something? Had she been looking for an excuse? Or was this simply her routine power trip escalating to a new level? Whatever the reason, she had chosen the wrong target this time. When night settled over the cul-de-sac, the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. The neighborhood felt peaceful on the surface, but beneath it, tension rippled quietly. I stepped outside one last time and stood beside my car. The air was still, save for the faint rustle of leaves. Everything looked normal, but I knew better. Somewhere behind closed blinds, Karen was plotting her next move. People like her didn't back down after one failed attempt. They doubled down, and I had no doubt she was already preparing for round two. What she didn't know was that I was ready. I had the records, the evidence, and the will to push back harder than she expected. And soon enough, she would learn that the quiet neighbor she targeted wasn't nearly as passive as she assumed. The wheels were already in motion, and the real confrontation hadn't even begun. Morning arrived with the kind of stillness that made the previous day feel distant, but the tension remained. The cul-de-sac was quiet, the lawns damp with dew, and the sky a soft gray that hinted at a coming storm. I woke with an uneasy feeling, a nagging instinct that Karen wasn't finished. People like her rarely accepted defeat, especially when it came from someone they viewed as an obstacle in their self-appointed authority. I stepped outside with a cup of coffee and surveyed the driveway. My car sat untouched, the same way I had left it. No stickers, no notices, no signs of interference. Everything looked normal on the surface. But underneath normality, a strange sense of anticipation lingered. And then I heard it. A distant rumble at first, low, mechanical, deliberate. The unmistakable growl of a diesel engine approaching from the far end of the street. It grew louder with every passing second, rolling through the neighborhood like the opening drumbeat of conflict. I set the coffee aside and moved closer to the street, my pulse quickening. A tow truck turned onto the cul-de-sac. Not a small one. This one was heavy-duty, equipped with a hydraulic boom and flashing amber lights. It crawled forward slowly, scanning house numbers as though searching for its target. The driver looked focused, unaware of the storm he was about to step into. I felt a surge of anger rise within me. I had already contacted the company. I had sent documentation. I had received acknowledgement. There was no reason, absolutely none, for a tow truck to be here unless someone had called them again. And only one person would have done that. Karen. The truck rolled closer, its lights reflecting off mailboxes and parked cars. As it approached my house, it slowed. Then it came to a full stop directly in front of my driveway. The driver stepped out, clipboard in hand, and looked toward my car with a thoughtful squint, as though trying to compare it to a description he had been given. I walked toward him calmly, though inside I was bracing myself. He didn't even greet me. He simply glanced at me, then back at the car, and then down at his clipboard. It was clear he had been dispatched under the assumption that the vehicle was abandoned or unauthorized. He was just doing his job, following the instructions he had been given. Inside the truck, the amber lights continued their slow rotation, casting rhythmic flashes across the street. Across the cul-de-sac, a familiar silhouette appeared behind a curtain. Karen, watching, observing, waiting. There was something disturbingly predictable about it. Her presence behind the glass, her intent focus, her anticipation. It all formed the same pattern she always followed. She made a complaint, positioned herself at a vantage point, and then watched the fallout unfold as though she were the director of a neighborhood drama. But this time, the script wasn't going the way she intended. Without hesitation, I retrieved the folder containing every document I had prepared and approached the driver. Even from a distance, I could tell he was conflicted. His brow furrowed, his posture hesitant. He wasn't sure whether he had the right property. That doubt gave me the upper hand. He gestured toward the car, indicating he had an order to remove it. But as he spoke, his tone revealed uncertainty. Something in his demeanor said he wasn't fully convinced. It was likely due to the fact that the car was clearly operable, clean, and properly parked on a private driveway. Even a tow operator could see that the complaint seemed off. I handed him the paperwork. He glanced at the documents, flipped through the registration, the deed copy, and the county ordinance excerpts. His expression changed. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. He straightened, cleared his throat, and became more cautious. Behind the curtain, Karen's silhouette edged closer, as though she could will the situation into the outcome she desired. The driver returned to his truck to radio his dispatcher. I watched him, arms crossed, as he explained the situation in low, muffled tones. His gestures were slow and deliberate. Every now and then he looked at my car again, then back toward the paperwork. Finally, he stepped down from the truck and walked over to me with a resigned posture. Though I couldn't hear the exact words, his head shake and raised palms were clear enough. The removal order couldn't be completed. He couldn't touch the vehicle. The complaint lacked basis. The dispatcher had confirmed the pause pending verification, and my documentation had sealed the deal. The tow truck engine revved softly as he prepared to leave. Inside her house, Karen's curtain snapped shut. The tow truck pulled away, its amber lights fading down the street until they disappeared entirely. The rumbling faded into silence, leaving only the hum of the neighborhood returning to its uneventful routine. But the battle wasn't over. Not even close. The fact that she had escalated the situation so quickly meant she wouldn't simply walk away. She had already doubled down once. She would do it again. Her pride wouldn't allow her to concede anything, not even something as trivial as a neighbor's parked car. I looked toward her house. The curtains remained still, but I knew she was there, watching, stewing, planning. Her sense of power had been challenged, and people like her did not handle that well. Later that afternoon, I found another note in my mailbox. This one wasn't handwritten. It was typed, printed, and clipped to a faux official header she had created herself, something meant to mimic HOA stationery. But the HOA had no such letterhead. This was her own creation, her own attempt to declare authority where none existed. The message accused me of refusing compliance with neighborhood standards, of endangering pedestrian visibility, and of creating an unsightly condition. It referenced no ordinance, no rule, no policy. It concluded with a threat of further reporting. I kept the letter. I added it to the packet. If she wanted to create a trail of evidence, I would let her. That evening, I walked the perimeter of the property again, not out of paranoia but preparation. Every inch of the driveway was clean. Every detail was in compliance. I documented everything, down to the placement of the recycling bins. By nightfall, a strange calm settled over me. Not the peace of resolution, but the calm that comes from understanding the nature of a conflict. Karen had declared war on something she believed she controlled, but she had underestimated the wrong person. She thought she had targeted a car. She didn't realize she had awakened someone far more meticulous and far more patient than she expected. The tow truck incident had only strengthened my resolve. If Karen wanted to escalate, she would be met with facts, documentation, and the kind of preparedness she never anticipated. The real turning point was still ahead, and when it arrived, Karen would finally face the consequences she had avoided for far too long.